few months ago, I ranted about the biggest mistake that writers should avoid. And that's the use of it is, it was, there is, there was. It sounds petty, but as a writer, if you never, ever use the passive voice, your writing is going to be better. And as a reader, you will notice that writing that you read, avoiding these bad habits, go a long way to making writing more clear and impactful. So I would like to take it to the next step from what would be considered grammar, even syntax, to... Hello and welcome to Bald and Bloviating. I'm your Bald Bloviating host, Mookie Spitz. Today I'm bloviating about writers. Stop the hate. How character and action supersede ideas in storytelling. Writing is a skill that must be learned, and good writing takes hard work. Central to that considerable effort is learning how to overcome one's own hubris as an author. You start with a scalpel, suggests David Mamet, and end with a chainsaw. Equally important to overcoming ego is focus. The star is the hero. Mamet goes on. The drama consists solely in the quest of the hero. Many writers fall into the trap of becoming enchanted, then blinded by their own ideas. Rather than telling a naturally compelling story about a hero who overcomes obstacles on their journey to achieve their goal. A discerning writer put it best when I heard her on another podcast describing this common phenomenon as hate. H.A.I.T.E, an acronym that stands for here's an idea, the end. The rules of great storytelling haven't changed since cave paintings and Aeschylus. Humans crave powerful emotional connections with relatable characters struggling to succeed. Along the way, we seek excitement, become infused with hope. The play is the thing. The hero is our projection. The drama triggers catharsis, while the fourth wall gives us some perspective. Drama channels the pain and conflict of our lived experience. Everyone has a plan, the boxer Mike Tyson once famously said, until they're punched in the face. The hero, despite such impediments, carries on, inspiring us to face and conquer adversity in our own lives. Now, the unique opportunities and challenges of every hero, every writer, every reader vary, but we seek meaning and truth within a world of disappointment and deceit. Storytelling, therefore, encourages active participation, propelled by continuous intention and problem solving. If the emergent narrative doesn't erupt through the hero's journey with and therefore beats, propelling dynamic action, the unfolding drama, astounding readers to the point they can't wait to see what happens next, then the story fails. The end. A terrific little lesson found on YouTube, check it out, is Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the super partnership, the super team behind South Park, Book of Mormon. The list goes on and on. They have the best advice for writers along these exact lines. And they differentiate a narrative, a dramatic arc that is driven by and therefores. So and such happens, and therefore this has to happen, and this happening entails, therefore, that other thing has to happen. And that's in stark contrast to and then, and then, and then, which is just a disassociative patchwork of things that just happen. How many times do you watch a movie, read a book, see a play, where things just happen? There seems to be no continuity or connection between one scene, one moment, and the last. Usually that's caused by hate. There's an idea in the head of the writer or writers. Often there's no idea at all, and they're filling space. They feel like they're writing drama, creating a story. It feels like this should happen or that happens. But if there's no logical and inevitable continuity, there's, ironically enough, no surprise and no drama. Now, bad writing, as I'm saying, is hateful in this way. It places ideas above all else and forgets that literature is about people and their struggles, not things or concepts and their exposition. Bad writers exert most of their effort on world building, leaving little or no room for flesh and blood characters to fight like hell to realize their clear and simple goals, or be destroyed trying. So much of fiction, so many stories I read go into elaborate detail about the setting. And the setting can go beyond just descriptions of the world that the characters inhabit. The lineage of the characters, this rolls into backstory. No, the writer does not need to go into the family history of a character for that character to come to life on stage, on screen, or on the page. The exact opposite is usually true. The less you know, the better. And all that you do know is the limited information provided by what you see, what you hear, what you will read. Your imagination fills in the blank, and most importantly, none of this is significant because drama is driven, as I mentioned, by the hero having a goal, encountering obstacles, and either conquering them or being destroyed. End of story. Good writers, in contrast, use these settings as a mere backdrop, if that, and force their characters to navigate through difficult situations using their own volition. The story isn't a description of a world and its inhabitants. Intense drama instead writing itself through the effervescent interplay of imaginary beings having genuine, relatable desires, viscerally competing for the spoils. Now, as a sucker for ideas, especially science and tech ones, I've been guilty of these hateful sins too. For years, I succumbed to the erroneous notion that if I'm excited by something, then everyone else must be too. I'm not alone with these bad habits, as most science fiction sucks, and for these same reasons. World building over characters, academics over action, backstory over movement, over problem solving. Yet even the geekiest of sci-fi readers yearn to be entertained and enthralled. Nobody's solely interested in a concept, location, abstraction, or distraction, no matter how exotic or cool. Everyone instead demands a shared experience fueled by human drama and compelling action. To laugh, to cry, to gasp with spontaneous excitement are the stuff dreams are made of, not ideas. Now, this all hit home in the last few years. Specifically, the mathematics and philosophy of the multiverse concept have fascinated me for years, and I've sensed the backdrop could drive a terrific science fiction novel. Now, since the idea was already a trope in countless books, comics, and movies, all over the place, really, I thought of a new way to spin it. But I struggled to bring that story to life. Like most writers, I had fallen prey to hate. Here's an idea, the end. Now, my basic idea that ended my writing career in this before it began was this. If an infinite number of universes exist in what we call the multiverse, then everything possible must be real somewhere. And if the hero makes a wish and is able to jump to another universe that's identical in every way to this one, except for their wish happening to be true, then they would be in possession of a genie's lamp. In other words, imagine infinite universes where every possibility plays itself out somewhere. Where? In another universe. Right now I'm wearing a blue shirt. There's another universe where I'm recording this podcast in a red shirt. That's the remedial idea. But the big idea that I had here is extrapolating that and drawing out an implication. If everything possible is somewhere real, then imagine a universe that's identical to this one. And I'm wearing this blue shirt and I'm recording this podcast, and I also happen to be a billionaire. Now, wouldn't that be nice? Now, that begs the question of whether I'd be recording a podcast if I'd be a billionaire and not busy bungee cording off of the Hoover Dam, for all I know. But the idea is cool. If an inventor could somehow design and develop a machine like H.G. Wells' time machine, only instead of jumping across time in this universe, it jumps between universes in an infinite multiverse, then it's like a wish-bringing stone. It's a genie's lamp. You make a wish. I wish I were a billionaire. And if you could jump into that machine and that machine can somehow read your mind and take you to that universe where everything is the same, or at least you think so, except I happen to be a billionaire. Cool, right? This idea popped into my head and I thought this would be a great vehicle. I've never seen it before. I could do something with this. Now, I had a great idea, but the bad idea was starting with the plot and not the characters. Now, I began by thinking of a way people could travel between universes within an infinite universe. So once again, I was enmeshed in hate. Here's an idea, the end. You can travel between universes. I started with that. To do so, I channeled my favorite childhood book, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. And I remember reading that book in elementary school and crying. It was so sad where Sylvester's mommy and daddy were having a picnic on Sylvester, who had turned into a rock, because the magic pebble that Sylvester found granted any wish. And I think, if I remember correctly, Sylvester was upset and wished he were a rock. And he became a rock, but he was a rock and he couldn't change his mind or get back to being Sylvester because he couldn't talk because he was a rock. Now, I don't remember the author, and I, of course, could quickly look it up, but nothing disparaging against that book, because it wasn't just driven by the idea, it was driven by the characters, which is why I cried. But I thought of Sylvester and the Magic Pebble in terms of the Magic Pebble being a device instead of poor Sylvester being separated from his parents and making a kid cry, namely me, and therefore being a great story. So I blew it with that. And then the second mistake I made was adding a dash of Jorge Luis Borges' The Olive, which is an amazing story about this guy who's got this gem-like object in his basement that literally contains all of reality. It's a variation of Borges' Library of Babel in a sensory kind of way. The olive contains everything in this gem. So the machine could be like that too. It contains everything because you can go everywhere. Isn't that cool? So the output of this misconstrued way of looking at this novel was, I thought of a magical gem that could teleport the protagonist to another universe. So like Sylvester, there'd be a gem and you make a wish and then woo, there you went. And then I created a poker game setup where the gem was introduced as like a betting chip. So I had a bunch of guys playing poker, and my main character, Carlos, is there. And he wins the gem in a felt little bag, and then weird stuff happens. So this short story sucked. I thought it was bad. I did my best. Other people felt it was okay. But the effort failed because it was driven by hate. I wrote the story back-asswards. Instead of empowering my guy Carlos, the hero, and letting his struggles drive the action, like, who the hell was this guy? I didn't need backstory, but I needed real motivation and real passion. I instead created this artificial construct designed with the sole purpose of explaining how the hell people could travel between universes. I mean, who gives a shit, really? If you don't care about the characters, if you're not put into a setting which is riveted with flesh and blood struggle, then who cares? The gem was a mere device, and Carlos was a shallow stick figure. He was just a two-dimensional instrument for somebody jumping between universes, because jumping between universes is an idea. So with that a dud, I took the lessons of H.A.I.T.E to heart, and I started from scratch. I just threw the whole story in the garbage. And by that I mean I didn't delete it. It's on Medium, and I'll put the link in the description here. I started the whole story over again. So I got rid of Carlos, the poker game, the chase scene, the adventure, the universe jumping, all gone. And I started from scratch with my new character, Johnny Fazuli. This time I began with Johnny, who became not some two-dimensional tool for slinging ideas in a mechanical plot, but a grotesque projection of myself. Personalizing an anti-hero, I infused my own emotions and his desires and actions, and in doing so, gave the keyboard over to him. Bingo! I can't overemphasize this epiphany that completely transformed how I write and what I write. Big chunks of my novel, which were based on the short story that I wrote, erupting out of this revelation. The short story was called Johnny Fazzulli and the Transfinite Reality Engine. I'll put a link in the description too. You can compare if you want. Carlos and the Bridge Between Worlds, and Johnny Fazzulli and the Transfinite Reality Engine, #winning. You can compare these two, and it's like night and day. The former was arduous and a fail, and the latter epitomized to me the breakthrough that every writer is dreaming of having. Finally, I figured this out. I just saw a clip on Instagram of Pink Floyd's guitar player David Gilmour, and he's being interviewed by Rick Beato. If you're not familiar with him, I've cited him before. He's an absolutely wonderful YouTuber, and he's a highly skilled musician. He plays guitar, bass, and drums. He understands production and recording. He's made a very, very legit career of himself playing in bands and being a producer. And on a whim, a few years ago, he made a YouTube video of his son demonstrating perfect pitch. And that went viral, and the light bulb went up in Rick Beato's head that he could do YouTube videos about music, and thus a terrific career was born in one of the best YouTube channels. Anyway, he's slowly been growing his audience to the point that A-list musicians have no choice but to take him seriously, and he's getting David Gilmour on. So I think this is the second interview with David Gilmour. Long story longer. This clip is wonderful. Beato's in Gilmour's studio, home studio, and Gilmour says this, which sticks with me and is absolutely wonderful. He recommends that you unfind other people so that you can find yourself. And this plagued me forever, and musicians can relate to this, where really accomplished shredder guitar players fall in love with Yngwie Malmsteen, and they play neoclassical guitar riffs for a decade until they come to the realization that they're just copying some other guy, no matter how terrific, and their own voice is nowhere to be found, and there's no song or passion being expressed. And I suffered from this for years, and it's an expression of, you guessed it, hate. Here's an idea, the end. The idea could be, I'm going to sound like Yngwie Malmsteen, the end. And what Gilmour's saying here is a variation of what I've been ranting about, which is, don't do that. Find other people. Find your own voice. And your own voice comes from your heart. Write about your own struggles, your desires, your passions, and project them into a protagonist, a hero, an anti-hero that becomes a living, breathing extension of your own fears and vulnerabilities. And then you got it going on. So the novel, and I'll put the novel in the links too. It's on Amazon. Finally, after years of struggle, folks, I wrote the novel I always wanted to read. I told my 18-year-old, soon-to-be 19-year-old son that my life's mission has been realized. And he looked at me like I'm nuts. But I told him, I said, for decades, I've always wanted to love my own writing. And for decades, I've been writing and I've been dissatisfied. It hasn't cut it for me. And I haven't really dedicated myself as I otherwise could or would or should for a number of reasons. You could say that, well, I had an instant family at the age of 37. I was happily single until I wasn't. That I had 1, 2, then 3 kids to take care of. That to do so, I took a corporate job. I became an agency guy, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, traveling, blah, blah, blah. And this would be fairly accurate, whereas before I wanted to be that bohemian artist, I wanted to be a writer. So a lot of this got shelved. And as I rant in another podcast, when I finally had my inevitable air quote breakdown, where I had enough, where the kids had reached the point where they were old enough more or less to fend for themselves, and my yearning, my hunger for my true self, which is, I think, this bald guy crouched over a keyboard typing manically away, I think that's me. This is me. So I've rekindled myself. But in this rekindling, what's really fueling the essence of my passionate drive is this sense of purpose, finally fueled with the bliss of loving what I write. And I love what I write and rant because it comes from the heart. I have unfound my mentors, and I have discovered myself. I found myself within the debris of trying too hard within the refuse of hate, which is, here's an idea, the end. It's not the idea, it's the passion. And that probably comes across as obvious to most folks, but it didn't to me for whatever reason. And thus, this rant, as an extension of the biggest mistake made by writers, what I called John McWhorter's Achilles heel, I finally got over the hate. So in essence, instead of trying to explain some abstract concept and create a cool but soulless technology with this universe jumping bullshit, I created and concentrated on and set loose a riveting fool having my own best and worst characteristics. The result was part hyperbolic biography, part Romana Clay, my literary doppelganger having even bigger problems than I do, of which creating the transfinite reality engine was a fanciful but compelling solution. The idea, the core concept, and a really good one of this universe jumping machine, which became combination wish-bringing stone, genie's lamp, time machine, whatever, was a fanciful but compelling solution to this guy's mess of a life. Bingo, that's it. So if you have a setting, if you want to put in, 37 generations of a dynasty, it's got to be relevant. Not only relevant, but central too. Your hero, your anti-hero, your protagonist, and the ancillary characters duking it out. They have to be, and therefores, driving the organic, emergent drama that the characters themselves, if you got it going on, are actually doing for you. And as I'm saying, from that spark, the rest of the story told itself. My hero told the story, and I became a mere conduit for his nonsense, passion, and hope. The other characters spontaneously popped into existence, each having their own goals and obstacles. The core idea proved useful, but great writing happened when I gave freedom to the emotional struggles of the characters, the emotional struggle of me. Me. Thomas Pynchon. Man, did it take me years to unfind Thomas Pynchon. But he famously wrote that you really just write about yourself. And that should have been a little clue for me. He was writing about himself. He wasn't writing about me. He wasn't writing about his readers. He was writing about himself, through himself. He's a big idea guy. But the stuff came together and held together and is great, great writing because it's from the vantage point of the hero. Now, nothing is more satisfying for a writer than finding your voice. And thanks to halting my own hate, I was finally able to write from my heart rather than my head and publish the novel I've always wanted to write. And I'm so blissed out, not only because I finally did it, but because it's only the first in a series. So I nailed the style too, which came out of this. If you check out the short story, and there's spoiler alerts in the short story, I literally only get about a third of the way through that original short story in 419 pages and 114,000 words in this first novel. So I'm still going just to complete the overarching arc of the story that's already been written, but that's just the beginning. Another 400 pages, and I'm ready. I've really only introduced this saga, and it's not built on hate. It's built on these characters saving the universe, saving the multiverse, and in doing so, saving themselves. That's the whole damn point. The Lover's Guide to the Infiniverse is the unfolding saga of how infinite options distract us. Sound familiar? Infinite options, all the hate out there. Distract us from the beauty of seeking and finding our one true love. And who would that be? That would be our own damn voice. And it sounds narcissistic, solipsistic, selfish in the sense that, well, you know, life is other people. Sure, life is other people. But as a writer, you need to channel your own angst and your own emotions. And maybe this is a tad introverted in the Jungian sense. Maybe extroverted writers might compliment. I might sound extroverted now, but I think I'm really introverted. Extroverted writers might delight in becoming other people, or maybe they don't even become other people, they are other people on their way to making everybody happy. But I know that as the kind of writer I am, I had to make myself happy. And I was unhappy for decades because I was writing from hate. I was writing from ideas instead of writing from my heart. So, amore. I hope this rant might resonate for somebody. And if I had a transfinite reality engine years ago, decades ago, not that I would have necessarily paid attention because I'm a stubborn fool, just like my hero, Johnny, I would have gotten into that transfinite reality engine and went to a universe where I could hear myself deliver this rant. Because if nothing else, if I would have paid attention, it very well might have saved me some time. And if you've listened and if it's registered, you're welcome. And thanks for listening to the Bald and Bloviating podcast. This is so much fun. I'll be ranting some more about this process, especially as I start moving into the second book in the series, which I can't wait to leap into, because I've got, frankly, I think most of it written because it didn't fit in the first book. But just like the first book, which was going to be half its length, I'm sure this bad boy is going to need more room to let the hate out.